As I have been introduced, Musana is my name. I work with the Department of Religion and Peace at Makerere University. My areas of study are new religious movements, and I have always told people, because of my academic background, I want to always stick to the usage of new religious movements, which some Christian groups call cults. I look at new religious movements as alternative spiritualities or alternative religious movements, alternative or new spiritualities or alternative spiritualities. And my presentations are always guided by what I would call a sociological outlook, not really theological. As you can listen, the colleague who has just been here is very passionate, and I may not match his eloquence. And as he introduced himself, a pastor, preacher of the gospel, my speech may be a bit frail, and perhaps my words may not be as convincing. My interest will be in a genuine discussion, specifically of the lessons that we can learn from what happened on 17th of March 2000. I have carried some stuff here because our department, the Department then of Religious Studies, undertook a research immediately after what had happened. I was not part of the research team, I must confess, and thereafter made a publication. It was a poor kind of publication, but it is in a format that is readable and in a language that is easy to understand. It is titled The Kanungu Cult Saga: Suicide, Murder, or Salvation. I haven't come with copies, but copies can be procured from the department. I do not know the cost. The head of department would tell you. But it is something that is very, very critical for us to read, because the research was done immediately after the happening. I would call it the happening. Perhaps at another point I will use the word which our colleague used, inferno. The burning. The other one that I have carried with me is another priceless document, which is more or less the Bible of the group. A timely message from heaven, the end of the present times. This was their guideline. I want to start from, I want to start with reading from here, specifically a bit that deals with the circulation of this material. The write-up says, proclaiming the message from heaven, information to all the people of God about the message that has come from heaven. November 4th, 1993 was the first day we received the certificate, and our colleague referred to it, from the government, allowing us to teach and spread the message about the restoration of the 10 Commandments of God. Our gratitude goes to government and all who at various degrees cooperated in making the permission to proclaim the word of God possible. The circulation of the message has first been made to the following. 1, His Holiness the Pope, John Paul II. 2, His Excellency Yoweri K. Museveni, President of the Republic of Uganda. 3, the Prefect for the Congregation for the Doctrine and Faith, the Vatican. 4, the prefect of the Congregation for the Propagation of the Faith, the Vatican. 5, His Eminence Cardinal Emmanuel Wamala, Kampala Archdiocese, Uganda. 6, His Excellency the Pronuncio to Uganda, the Pope Pronuncio to Uganda. 7, His Grace the Archbishop of the Church of Uganda. 8, His Eminence the Chief Cadi to Uganda. 9, all the bishops of the Episcopal Conference. 10, some of the bishops of the Church of Uganda. 11, the Chief Justice. 12, the Cabinet Ministers of the Republic of Uganda. 13, Secretary to the Episcopal Conference. 14, the Chief of Staff, Uganda Army. 15th, the Inspector General of Police. Should I read all these? 16th, the Commissioner of Prisons, Uganda. 17th, some residential district commissioners. 18, the Registrar for the non-government organizations. 19th, some of the county chiefs, sub-county chiefs, the local council, the local councils where the movement originates. 20, the Probation and Social Welfare Department, Ministry of Labor and Relief. 21, the chairperson of the Association of the Religious Men and Women in Uganda. 22, the Regional Superior of the Missionaries of Africa in Uganda. 23, the Regional Superior of the Verona Fathers in Uganda. 24, the Chairman of the Catholic Laity Uganda. 25, the Marian Workers in Uganda. 26, the Chaplains, Makerere University. I've seen one of the former chaplains here. But that was before he became chaplain. 27, the editor, the New Vision. 28, the editor, Orumuri. Those who do not appear on this list, please be patient. Some copies will come. Deo Volente, be printed soon. If I was given chance, I would ask how many government departments are represented here. I wrote to Rogers asking him, because he told me there was a march. I said, I hope you have invited police. And he said they would be there. They will be represented. The Human Rights Commission. Anyone from the Judicial Commission or the Judicial Services. Now, I was interested in the circulation of this book. I heard you laugh, especially about some bishops. My interest was to hear whether there were some pastors of the Pentecostals and born-agains among these. I didn't see any. And that's quite interesting. Okay. Allow me to also start with a quote, which is more or less related to what the colleague quoted. And I have heard this quote from my wife quite often, who did history. I never did history. And she keeps repeating this to children when they have made a mistake. And she says, you have learned nothing and forgotten nothing. And when I inquired, it is to do with the French Revolution, is it? The changes that were taking place in France and the repetition of mistakes, especially after the abdication by Napoleon, and the commitment or repeating of mistakes over and over. Another quotation I would make is of a friend pathologist who tells me that his pathology professor, one of his pathology professor, on encouraging them to do the course would tell them that dead make us wise. When you go and watch what is taking place in some of those rooms, the chopping, the opening up of the cadavers or the bodies, you would not withstand the horror. But it is by cutting those dead bodies and carrying out post-mortem that they find the causes of death, and then they can prescribe against some of these causes. I hope there are medical personnel here who can help in challenging or correcting the impression which is being given by my colleague. Or also quoting George Bernard Shaw, who says, "We are made wise not by the recollection of our past, but by the responsibility for our future." And here, we are dealing with our responsibility for the future. And when we say never again, how responsible are we? Let me again say something that is out of my prepared text. I had the colleague again passionately talk, and I like quoting 1 Peter chapter 3, the text he quoted. I teach a course called Introduction to the Bible, both Old and New Testament, apart from the New Religious Movements course that I teach. And I am overwhelmed by the lack of knowledge of the essentials of Christian faith in that generation that I'm teaching. In fact, it looks like the Bible is a bitter herb to them. And I hear some of them cannot even carry a Bible to the lecture room simply because they don't want to be considered born-agains. Why? Because it looks like the born-agains are a public nuisance. Did I say it correct? Did I say it correct? But some of us, I must submit, went through catechetical instructions. We were instructed, and it was hard work, labor, with tests and examinations. I dare ask the men in the collars whether they are doing that effectively today. Or they are providing shortcuts. And I meet students who tell me they are born again because their parents are born again. And I usually remind them that sleeping in a garage does not turn you into a car. So being born of born-again parents does not automatically make you a born-again. But this is a tradition we have perpetuated, that you are Roman Catholic, you are Muslim, you are Anglican, you are whatever, because your parents are. And some of us have not been forgiven by some of our colleagues because we have not forced our children to follow the way we move. We have taught them the essentials of Christian faith and left them with choices to make. I wouldn't like to have a child who brings my faith into disrepute by acting contrary to what I believe. Once he has become of age, let him make his choice. Now let me go to my prepared text. Repeating mistakes of the past can be forgiven, especially if we own up. However, it becomes worse when we learn something and forget everything. Has it been sanitized? So it is the purpose of my presentation to be reminded of the things that we should have learned, or we should learn from the Kanungu Inferno, as we are referring to it now. It is important to note that the onset that everyone who engaged with what happened on the 17th March 2000 could not come to a sensible conclusion on what happened on this day. Because we don't have anyone who was left to tell the story. And that is for a fact. The title of the book that I have shown you from the Department of Religion and Peace is not conclusive on whether it was suicide, murder, or salvation. And a colleague wrote at the end and said it appears that they were told on the 17th March the Blessed Virgin Mary would appear to them and deliver her last message before taking them to heaven, while the rest of humanity perished. For this reason, in the preceding days, members from other camps were brought to Kanungu by vehicles in order to be present at the great and solemn occasion. The story of what happened is now well known. Did the Virgin Mary appear as promised? We shall perhaps never know. We can only say, while to heaven they may have gone, and perhaps many of them genuinely believed it would be the case, it is difficult to believe that they went inside that church expecting to die in such a horrendous manner. Was the Kanungu fire and other related death a case of suicide? It is hard to believe that all the movement members wanted to or expected to die in such a horrific manner. So, the theory of mass suicide must be ruled out, especially given the presence of so many young children. If you look at the appendix, we have a list of the people who died from the information gathered from the different institutions. Was it murder? We shall leave this question to the police and the law courts. Was it an act of salvation? This is still a subject of debate. However, and as a final conclusion, one must have trust in the loving mercy of God and continue to believe that the people who innocently perished in Kanungu and elsewhere shall have a place in the Father's house. What a good conclusion. Religion in society becomes an escape route in most cases. Where you have no conclusive answer, sometimes the best you can do is to run to religion. And so the prayer. And Roger has also prayed for the departed souls, I think. But that is for psychological purposes. Because the members went and are no more. And as we said, no one was left to tell the story. Obviously, it is regrettable that what has come through from government circles are more of conjectures, offering us no closure to the Kanungu Inferno. These are the lessons we need to learn, friends. No conclusive answer has been given. This has given rise to many conspiracy theories, which you cannot quote here, because I don't want to give credence to some of these theories or even perpetuate them. This conference comes in the context of COVID-19, which is having a global impact. Now, you have seen the lockdown in countries. Yesterday night, I was talking to colleagues, some friends of mine from West Africa, who were having a meeting in Norway. And we were on our web app, and we were able to meet. They cannot meet anywhere because they are in a lockdown. Because in these countries, lives of nationals matter. No one will die without a deep inquiry and a conclusion with a statement of what the cause of death was. What happened to Kanungu? Parliament, at one point, declared that government should not be held responsible. And I will be quoting from some sources. Do the lives of people matter? If you read the New Vision of 6th November 2014, it has a caption, "Government cleared of Kanungu massacre claims." And if I may quote, presenting the report, the Mumende woman MP and Defense Committee Chairperson, Benny Namugwanya, said, while the state has the responsibility and obligation to ensure security, service delivery, protection of rights, and the general welfare of its citizens, it would be foolhardy for citizens to throw caution to the wind by sacrificing their discretion in making choices for matters innately personal, such as religion. She is saying individuals are responsible. If they died, they were responsible for death, for their death. In other words, they committed suicide. That is the conclusion I would make. And this house was presided by our current speaker. The Minister for General Duties in the Office of the Prime Minister, Tasis Kabwejere, this is a professor, said the government should not interfere in matters of faith, but urged the public to report any suspicious activity by cult to the authorities. Conditions which produce cults must be avoided so that we live in a decent society. I buy Professor Kavejere's views. He taught me sociology when I was a first year here. I'm not in agreement with some of his views, but this view, I'm in agreement with him. He says conditions which produce cults must be avoided. Now, another member said, as a person who almost joined the church after being recruited by Father Dominic Kataribabo, I find all these recommendations far-fetched and I cannot support them. The government has a duty to protect the people and their property, but failed. It should therefore own up and compensate the bereaved. This was Kafuda Boaz, the Busongora South MP. Colleagues, I must confess, I once lived in Rwanda, and the reality of the genocide in Rwanda is so overwhelming. You can't live in Rwanda and hear those stories and you are not traumatized. I asked a question while in Rwanda. I was there for over 1.5 years. I asked a question. Why don't people sue the government? Can't people sue government? Through the Attorney General, they said, I'm asking you. We are here discussing this matter today. Are there land members here who can put up a case for the protection of the vulnerable people? It is one thing to say we are contending for our faith, we know our faith. It is another to know that there are certain people, because of certain conditions, who will fall prey to these wrong teachings and practices. Who doesn't know what is taking place today in churches? Now, the aftermath of March 17, 2000 is the reality of the registration of most of these religious groups which were very free in their operations. I hope you know that. The birth of National Fellowship of Born-Again Pentecostal Churches. Do all Pentecostals subscribe to that? I hope there are Pentecostals here.
Yes, we are here.
Thank you so much. Does Miracle Center subscribe? Does Victory Christian Church subscribe? I'm asking these questions because we want to hide into our fortresses of sometimes claiming to be defending the faith, and yet we are not having a social engagement, an actual social engagement. And I want to challenge ACFA specifically to lead this in this to literally engage legal experts in some of these cases. Why don't we force some of these members to subscribe to some of these umbrella bodies for regulation? Some guy comes up and says, I'm quoting, and because I listened to it, that marriage vows are satanic. And he's saying it on airwaves. Where is Uganda Communications Commission? I have listened to it myself. He is a pastor. I don't call him pastor. And I have said it publicly, I don't call him pastor. Where are government agencies? If we fast forward and check out police, do they have forensic experts? Do they place some of these religious groups on the radar? Obviously, the LC systems have crumbled in this country. But it so happens that the police which is able to detect crime is so much concentrated in the political arena. Don't you know that we can place you under house arrest if you are a political threat? Can religious threats be put at the same level as political threats? Because there is the politics of religion, and the government of Uganda and its leadership is very well qualified, and it knows how to use religion for political means. So what are we doing about that? Check. If you read about the Kanungu Inferno, you will not be shocked, because the resident district commissioner was in the law. There was close cooperation between members of the group. Was he brought to account? Were the authorities brought to account? And so, if there is government and you believe that all authority comes from God, you have a responsibility to also challenge government to take up its responsibility for the nationals. I think ACFA, you need to up the act and make sure that there is engagement with the government authorities. I'm digressing, but I want to speak from my heart, much more than from the text. It's very interesting to note that the National Bureau for NGOs is a semi-autonomous body under the Ministry of Internal Affairs, established by the NGO Act 2016. And the Act has mandates to register, regulate, coordinate, inspect, monitor, and oversee all NGO operations in the country. Is it living up to its mandates? Or we are saying we make policies. There is now the talk about the religious and faith-based organizations policy. Have you heard about it? Have you heard about it? And there are many people advocating against it. Very many, and especially the self-styled leaders. That policy, I don't support it personally. Because I believe there are laws strong enough in this country to prevail over any situation. This is my conviction from what I know. Does the NGO board, under the Ministry of Internal Affairs, regulate, inspect, and monitor? If your organization is registered, when last were you checked, or what do we call it, inspected by the NGO board? As the colleague has already mentioned, it was MRTCG was registered, duly registered. It was given freedom to carry out its activities unhindered. Can we advocate for self-regulation in these umbrella organizations? Buffet, NAFPAC, EFU, Evangelical Fellowship Uganda, and all these groups. Can we advocate for self-regulation? And now there is also, in the traditional setting, I hope you have seen Senga Kulanama and yes, you don't know Senga Kulanama and Sophia Namten, Mama Fina. Have you seen how they are teaching our throats? Very hard competition. That one of them has even started campaigning for President Museveni to preempt the abilities and potential of the other, who has been giving out money, donating money. Am I talking about things you know, friends? Huh? And competing for supremacy. The other time, immediately, the other one was given Walusi Hill as her seat, as a form of authority. The other one also undertook to go to the other side of the country, and she had a procession. We are not talking about, for me, I'm not talking about Christianity alone. I'm talking about these groups that are even violent in Islam, threatening the security of the nation. We find a lot of jostling and many frosted relationships among religious groups, and this applies to both old and new religious groups. If you were to sit with the Interreligious Council of Uganda, the talks that they have are much more of boardroom talks. Outside, obviously, there is no serious collaboration where they can give joint and authoritative statements. So members of the public are lost, are left with no one to protect them. People are desperately looking for where to be. Lessons to learn. Religion is a security matter, and it can be used by criminals to hide their heinous actions and pass unnoticed. And therefore the need to tell the true from the false, the right from the wrong. I do not so much trust our church institutions, or let me use the word religious institutions, to be judges in their own cases. Because when you see a monkey deciding a case against the forest, then it has become domesticated or is living in a zoo. How I wish, if you are religious and you are in a religious institutions, you used academic guidelines, neutral guidelines, to challenge some of these groups. Religion is a social institution and should be understood as such. And it will always address the needs in the society. So we can come here and yawn our views. As long as there are needs in the society, cults will prevail. Yes? Just carry out a demographic survey of who are members of the cults. The young, the youth. Yes or no? In most cases, the youth. They are looking for something that satisfies. The old institutions are not up to their needs because they are still using the old forms to communicate new messages, which becomes very relevant. Do you know that a religious service can end up being a psychological session, a counseling session, or a drug session where you feel, oh. And when you go out, you face the reality, you come back. Do you wonder why people, day on end, stay in places of worship? Some of them are trying to run from the reality. And religion is providing a way out. If you read this book, the context is very, very instructive. HIV/AIDS is ravaging the nation. And they are saying you have broken the 6th commandment. No wonder God has released this judgment through Slim. That is the context. Priests are failing to live up to their calling. That is the context. The Roman Catholic Church not standing up to what it is supposed to be from the very beginning. That is the context. So what does your church teach? Is it upgrading its systems? As I said, government may not have the capacity to decisively deal with marginal or new religious movements. The problem here is that the history of Uganda is so much intertwined with the history of the religious institutions. There have been religious wars. Political parties were formed accordingly. And the current regime thinks the best way is to let them play according to their rules. Do you understand what I'm saying, friends? Religion can be abused, I have already said that, but the worst form of abuse comes through manipulation and mind control techniques. Credonia Mwerinde is renowned as the program. Don't we have accomplished, well accomplished mind controllers in this country? I mean, you tell people, people are churning, they're making business. You tell people, give and it shall be given a good measure. What is the context of the verse? Sow the seed. The seed has to be money. And what you give is going to be multiplied. So that is modern day betting. These are realities we are living with. And people are made to believe. Did you see the newspaper report, New Vision today, that a young man has burned some 3 churches because they are preaching to him wealth and he is not wealthy? No, today. Check it out. It is often mistakenly thought that it is the weak who turn to religion or religious proposals or ideas. Religion does not depend on the strength of the individual. It many times depends on the factors at play. The needs in the society. It is also important to note that religion, to some, gives meaning to life and answers to questions of and in life, not answered by anything. Individuals and family members join a religious group that they consider, in this case, they consider to be an improved version of the Roman Catholic faith. Ask, you will hear. Most fell prey because they thought this was an improved version of the Roman Catholic faith, where you are saying the Mass not according to Second Vatican, but now you are saying it according to the traditional ritual. You are facing the altar. You are not supposed to be facing the masses. You know the adage, they are saying that not all that glitters is gold. This can be applied to religious groups. But it is very difficult to tell the genuine from the false. As our brother said, you have to subject gold to intense temperatures for you to prove that it is not dross, but gold. I do not know whether we have the capacity to heat the crucible to a level that the gold will remain and the dross will be left out. The prosperity doctrine. Who doesn't want to prosper? The health and wealth doctrine. Who doesn't want to be healthy? Those are challenges, colleagues. But I want to say this. It's very important to watch out for the queer, extraordinary religious claims, beliefs, and practices. Miracles are beyond explanation since they defy the laws of nature. Any miracle expected to happen becomes a fake. You tell me expect a miracle, and the miracle happens. And manipulators know how to act. I watch TV stations of the different pastors today in Uganda. It's drama. And these members are accomplished dramatists. They may not have gone to the school of drama, but they have the art. What do you have? Some of you are preachers here. What do you have? Dead orthodoxy or theology, which is not updated. A rigid lifestyle with a prescribed code of conduct dictated by leaders should be put to question. Why should there be separated of sexes, families, married partners in a religious group? MRTCG did that. Why should there be withdrawal from the society? Why shouldn't prophetic claims be subject to the test? Don't you see prophets? Don't you see prophets today? When I was growing up, prophecy was the last thing to claim. But these days when I'm walking around Makerere, I see very clean-shaven young men posing as prophets. I don't know who gave them the mantle, but they have the claim. And you hear the case, do not touch the Lord's anointed and do no harm to my prophets. Quoting 1 Chronicles chapter 16, verse 22. Why should visions and apparitions not be subjected to tests? Why shouldn't those who claim to be inspired be subjected to tests, and especially their lifestyles questioned? Fellows are stinkingly rich, and the masses continue giving, and the government does not demand accountability, books of accounts from some of these organizations. And we are talking about sensitization of masses, celebrating Kanungu. We are talking about physical death. Can we start thinking about even financial death? Because fellows are being manipulated day in, day out. You see pastors with huge, expansive mansions and farms and huge cars of the American dream come real. Don't we see this? How are the members? Someone questioned one pastor giving one leading religious leaders in the world, I think it was about $12,000. The question was, and is, why should you be giving this American religious leader these dollars when you have paupers in your congregation? Or you are going to tell me that Jesus said the rich will always, the poor you will always have. But above all, for me, I wish I would refer to some of these texts here. Above all, for me, most new religious movements come to answer situations and conditions in society that are very critical. The year 2000 was anticipated to end up in a certain way. That's why many people, even that day, went to churches. They never slept because they feared, they thought Jesus was returning. No wonder for these members who were so much concerned about escape, which escape through salvation did not happen, must have been duped, this is my conclusion, by their leaders who had undertaken or used mind control techniques. And because now the members were asking for accountability of their property they had sold in preparation for salvation, now it was March 2000, when 2000 was not supposed to come. I have a section in the book which talks about 2000, the year was not coming. Okay? Now it has come, you are fearing accountability. The best way is to find an express way of duping these members and exterminating them. And that can happen to any of us. Because today we even have living physical gods in our midst. I saw one prominent guy saying, even if it was to lick, to kiss this shoe, I will kiss it even 1,000 times. Because this is the man of God. Okay? We once had a report and it was saying this God was admitted in hospital. These are realities. And people are falling head over heels to these groups. Why? Because of the social material conditions. Let me conclude by saying the challenge to us is to address the needs of the society. Jesus, in his teaching, I want to borrow, fed the multitudes and then reached out to them, healed the sick and reached out to them. Some he would even tell, go and tell no one. Although to others he would say, go and show yourself to the priests. Do we understand, friends? It's very, very important for us to look out for the conditions, the factors that lead to the evolution of these groups, and then find alternatives and make prescriptions of our interventions. This is my recommendation from the lessons I learned from Kanungu. Thank you.